They said the desert keeps its secrets, but they were wrong. Some secrets don't stay buried. They get caught on the edge of a cliff during a storm, screaming for a life they refuse to give up. When Jack Callahan, a burned-out Marine, pulled a wild Mustang from that darkness, he thought he was just doing the right thing. He thought he was saving a horse. He was wrong. What he pulled from that canyon wasn't just an animal. It was a witness. It was a crime. And it was the one thing that would force him to fight a war he thought he'd left behind in the sand. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if you like stories about fighting for what's right, make sure you subscribe. The wind in Cedar Ridge Valley had teeth. It chewed on the corners of the old cabin, rattling the tin roof like distant gunfire. Jack Callahan didn't notice. He sat by the window, a glass of whiskey sweating on the table, watching the moon get swallowed by the fog. The desert outside was silver and dead. The clock on the wall had stopped. Time didn't matter much out here anyway. Lily, his daughter, was asleep. The dog, Ranger, was a warm weight against his boots. The only sound was the wind and the ghosts it carried. He could still hear them. The crackle of the radio, the shouts, the one word that haunted his sleep. Pull back. He squeezed his eyes shut, about to reach for the whiskey, when a different sound cut through the noise, a scream, not human. It was high, broken, and full of a pain he knew too well. Jack froze. He listened. Nothing but the wind. Then it came again, closer this time, a raw, desperate cry from the edge of the world. He shot to his feet, the chair clattering behind him. Not tonight, he muttered. Ranger was already at the door, hackles raised, a low growl in his throat, staring toward Echo Cliff. Jack grabbed his coat, a flashlight, and an old climbing rope from the corner. He paused at Lily's door. Her face was peaceful in the dim light. A picture of his wife, Maggie, sat on her nightstand, her smile a memory from a warmer time. "Every life deserves a chance," he whispered to the photo, the words tasting like rust in his mouth. Then he stepped out into the storm. The wind hit him like a fist. Snow crunched under his boots. Ranger trotted ahead, a dark shape against the grey landscape, urging him on. The cry came again, a trembling sound that vibrated in Jack's bones. He moved faster, instinct taking over, the old soldier in him waking up. He reached the ridge and killed the light, crouching low. He could hear it clearly now. Hooves scrambling on loose rock, the snap of roots giving way. And then he saw it. A wild Mustang, its coat the color of ash, was dangling halfway down the canyon wall. Its leg was tangled in a mess of roots and rock. A broken bridle hung from its neck, dark with what looked like blood. Every time it struggled, more of the cliff crumbled away into the blackness below. Jack's breath caught in his throat. For a second, he wasn't in Nevada. He was back in Afghanistan, a young private named Henson hanging from a rope, screaming his name. "Don't let go, sir." He had let go. His hand started to shake. He almost turned back. But the Mustang screamed again, a sound that tore through memory and left only the raw, bleeding present. "Easy, boy," Jack heard himself say. "I've been there too." The horse went still, its eyes catching the moonlight. They weren't wild. They were terrified. Something in Jack's chest broke open. He looped the rope around a thick, gnarled root, tied the other end around his waist, and started to climb down. The rock was slick with ice. The rope burned his hands. Ranger barked from the top of the cliff, a frantic, helpless sound. "Stay!" Jack yelled, his voice stolen by the wind. The horse panicked, the ledge groaning under its weight. "Hold still," Jack barked. "You move, we both die." The animal froze. He got closer and saw the real problem. The leather of the broken bridle wasn't just snapped. It was cut, sliced clean through as if with a knife. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this. The thought hit him like a physical blow. Who would do this? And why? Before he could process it, he pulled his own knife and sawed at the strap still tangled around the horse's throat. It snapped free. The Mustang lunged, the last of the ledge giving way. Jack grabbed its mane as they fell, the rope catching them with a jerk that knocked the wind out of him. They dangled there, man and beast, over the abyss. Ranger's barking was a frantic prayer from above. Jack gritted his teeth, pulling with a strength he didn't know he had left. His arms screamed, the rope dug into his skin. The Mustang scrambled, its hooves finding purchase where there was none. One last heave, and they tumbled over the edge of the cliff, landing in a heap of snow and dust. Jack lay on his back, gasping for air, staring at the grey, spinning sky. The world was silent except for his own ragged breathing and the shuddering gasps of the creature beside him. He rolled onto his elbow. The horse lay on its side, trembling. Jack reached out a hand, palm open. "You're all right now," he whispered. The Mustang looked at him, its dark eyes reflecting the moon. The terror was gone, replaced by a deep, weary understanding. Two survivors, scarred and stubborn, alive against the odds. Jack took the old army blanket from his pack and draped it over the horse's shoulders. It shivered once, then was still. He stood there, looking down at what he'd pulled from the edge, a new question burning in his mind. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was something else. It was the beginning of a hunt. By the time he got the Mustang into the old, dilapidated barn, the blizzard hit. The wind screamed, and snow blew sideways, sealing them in. "Dad, what happened?" Lily was standing in the doorway, her face pale. "He fell," Jack said, the lie feeling thin. "I couldn't leave him." She didn't question it. She just saw the wounded animal and stepped forward without fear. They bolted the door, built a small fire in a metal trough, and for the next 3 days, the world shrank to the circle of firelight in the dusty barn. Jack's fever hit on the second day. The rope burns on his hands were infected, an angry red line crawling up his arm. He drifted in and out of consciousness, the howl of the storm outside mixing with the gunfire in his head. In his fever dreams, he was back on that cliff. He saw the horse fall, but this time he saw something else. A shape. A man standing at the top of the ridge, watching. The face was lost in shadow, but the image was sharp, terrifying. He wasn't alone out there. Lily tended to them both, her small hands steady. She cleaned Jack's wounds with melted snow. She spoke softly to the Mustang, dressing the gash on its leg. "I'll call you Ash," she whispered, stroking its neck, like something that survived the fire. Jack watched through a haze of fever and memory. He saw his wife, Maggie, in his daughter's face, heard her voice in Lily's quiet courage. "Every life deserves a chance," he murmured. The horse, Ash, seemed to understand. He grew calmer under Lily's touch, his breathing evening out. On the third day, the fever broke. The storm passed, leaving a world muffled in white silence. Jack stood, weak but clear-headed, and went to check on the horse. He knelt to examine the leg, and that's when he saw it. Underneath the dried mud and blood on Ash's flank was a mark, not a scratch. A brand. Black letters seared into the hide, GT. Jack's blood ran cold. He knew that brand. It belonged to Thomas Gage, the biggest rancher in the valley. A man who owned everything and everyone for miles. A man known for his temper and his ruthlessness. "Dad, what is it?" Lily asked from behind him. Jack didn't answer. He just stared at the brand. It all clicked into place. The cut bridle, the figure on the ridge. This wasn't a wild horse, this was Gage's horse, and Gage, for some reason, had tried to kill it. He'd pushed it off that cliff. Ash wasn't just a survivor, he was a witness to his own attempted murder. And now he was in Jack's barn. They weren't just sheltering an animal, they were hiding evidence, evidence that could get them killed. The silence in the barn was suddenly heavy, dangerous. Lily stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the brand. She didn't need him to explain. She could feel the shift in the air. "He tried to kill him," she whispered, her voice trembling with a fury that was older than her years. Jack finally looked at her, his face grim. "Yeah," he said, "and I don't think he's the kind of man who likes leaving loose ends." Outside, the sun glinted off the fresh snow, a beautiful, blinding lie. The storm of nature was over. The storm of men was just beginning. That night, Jack couldn't shake the fever dream. The shadowy figure on the ridge. He sat in the dark of the barn, the unopened whiskey bottle a silent temptation. Ash stood nearby, a calm presence in the gloom. Jack was cleaning an old lantern when his shaking hands fumbled. The lantern tipped, oil spilling across a pile of dry straw. The flame caught instantly. Fire bloomed, a hungry orange tongue licking up the stall wall. Ranger barked frantically. "Dad!" Lily screamed, woken by the commotion. Jack staggered back, disoriented, the fire and the war and the fever all blurring into one terrifying moment. But before he could move, Ash exploded into action. The horse kicked down the stall door with a splintering crash and surged forward, planting himself between Jack and the spreading flames. He didn't run. He stood his ground, snorting at the smoke, a living shield. Lily, quick thinking, grabbed a water bucket and doused the fire. Smoke filled the barn, thick and acrid. When it cleared, Jack was on his knees, coughing, his hands raw. Ash stood over him, trembling but resolute. "You saved me," Jack rasped, looking up at the creature. As Lily helped him up, her foot kicked something in the scorched straw. It was a small, dark object, partially melted by the heat. She picked it up. It was a piece of leather, the end of the bridle strap, the part Jack had seen on the cliff. The cut was still visible, a clean, straight line. But there was something else. Burned into the leather, almost invisible, was another small mark. Not GT, it was a military insignia, a unit patch, one Jack recognized instantly. It was from his old unit, the one he'd served with in Kandahar, the one Deputy Miguel Ruiz had served in too. The world tilted on its axis. Ruiz, the local deputy, the man who had shown up just yesterday with Gage, the man who shared Jack's past. Why would a piece of his unit's history be on a bridle used to try and kill a horse? The questions piled up, each one heavier than the last. Was Ruiz involved? Was he helping Gage? Or was this something else entirely? A message? A warning? Jack held the piece of leather in his palm. It felt like a live grenade. The piece they had found was a fragile illusion. They were caught in something far more dangerous than a dispute with a local rancher. The ghosts of Jack's past weren't just in his head anymore. They were here, in his valley, and they were hunting. The next morning, the world felt too bright, too quiet. The melted snow dripped from the eaves like a ticking clock. Jack knew he was out of time. He tucked the scorched piece of leather into his pocket and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Just after dawn, a dusty patrol car rolled up the drive. Deputy Miguel Ruiz got out, his face unreadable under the brim of his hat. "Jack," he said, his voice even, "Gage filed a report. A stolen horse. Matches the description of the one you got." Jack didn't flinch. "He's not stolen, he was pushed." Ruiz's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second. "That's a serious accusation, Jack. You got any proof?" Jack thought of the leather in his pocket. He thought of their shared history, the dust and blood of Kandahar. He decided to take a chance. "I've got a question for you first, Miguel. What were you doing up on Echo Cliff 2 nights ago?" The air crackled. Ruiz's hand instinctively went to his sidearm, then dropped. He looked around, ensuring they were alone. "You can't win this, Jack," Ruiz said, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "Gage owns this valley. The judge, the sheriff. They're all in his pocket. He finds out you have that horse, he won't just take it back. He'll bury you." He was warning him, but it was more than that. It was a confession. Ruiz knew. He knew what Gage had done. "So you're just going to let him get away with it?" Jack demanded. Ruiz looked away, toward the mountains. "It's not that simple. I have a family here, a job." He looked back at Jack, his eyes filled with a conflict that ran bone deep. "But I didn't spend 3 tours watching good men die just to come home and watch a bully like Gage run the show." He took a step closer. "He's rounding up wild Mustangs, branding them with fake BLM marks, and selling them to slaughterhouses across the border. It's illegal as hell, and it's brutal. That horse," he nodded toward the barn, "he saw too much. Gage was making an example of him." This was it, the twist that changed everything. This wasn't about one horse, it was about dozens, a criminal enterprise hiding in plain sight. "Gage is coming with the official paperwork in 24 hours, Ruiz said, his voice urgent. "He'll have a warrant. I'll have to be with him. I won't be able to stop him then." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was a shipping manifest. "This is his next shipment. It leaves tomorrow night from a holding pen on the north pasture. If you could somehow prove those horses are wild, not his, you could stop him." He pressed the paper into Jack's hand. "I was never here, Jack. You do this, you're on your own. But it's the only shot you have." He got back in his car and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and an impossible choice hanging in the air. Jack looked at the manifest. He looked at Lily, who had been watching from the porch, her small face set with determination. He looked at the barn, where Ash was a silent testament to Gage's cruelty. Ruiz was right. It was an impossible fight. But Jack Callahan had been fighting impossible fights his whole life. He was just tired of losing. "No more running," he said to Lily, to himself, to the ghosts. "This time we stand our ground." They had less than 24 hours. The plan was desperate, a long shot. Jack knew from his time in the service that wild Mustangs have a unique genetic marker, different from domesticated breeds. If he could get a blood sample from Ash and one from the horses in Gage's holding pen, and find someone who could test them fast enough. It was a sliver of a chance, but who could he trust? The local vet was Gage's cousin. The sheriff was on his payroll. Then he remembered a name from an old newspaper article. Dr. Rena Moore, a state wildlife biologist who had clashed with ranchers over Mustang protection laws. She was based 200 miles away in Carson City. "Lily, get your mother's camera," Jack said. The plan was forming, sharp and dangerous. Lily didn't hesitate. While Jack carefully drew a small vial of blood from Ash's neck, Lily took pictures. Not just of Ash, but of the GT brand, the cut bridle, the scorched piece of leather with the unit patch. She documented everything, her small hand surprisingly steady. "We need proof they can't deny," Jack said. They loaded Ranger and the evidence into their old pickup truck. Jack left a note on the cabin door, a simple, "Gone for supplies," a flimsy shield against suspicion. Then they drove, the truck rattling down the dirt road, away from the valley that had become a prison. The drive was tense, every passing car a potential threat. They made it to Carson City by late afternoon. Finding Dr. Moore's office was easy. Getting past her skeptical receptionist was harder. "She's busy, she doesn't take walk-ins," the woman said, not looking up from her computer. "It's a matter of life and death," Lily said, her voice clear and strong. She slid one of her photos across the desk, a close-up of Ash's haunted eyes. The receptionist paused. She looked at the photo, then at the determined girl in front of her. She picked up the phone. Dr. Rena Moore was a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She listened to Jack's story, examining Lily's photos, her expression growing darker with each detail. She looked at the blood vial and the scorched leather. "Gage has been a thorn in my side for years," she said, her voice tight. "We've suspected him of illegal roundups, but we've never had concrete proof. This," she tapped the manifest Ruiz had given them, "this is the smoking gun, but a blood test takes 48 hours. You don't have that kind of time." Hope plummeted. It wasn't enough. They were too late. Then Lily spoke up. "What if you didn't have to test the blood?" she asked. Rena and Jack looked at her. "My mom. She was a photographer," Lily said, pulling out her mother's worn leather journal. "She taught me that every picture tells a story. Look." She pointed to one of her photos of Ash. "See the way his neck is thicker, the shape of his head. He's a Kiga Mustang. Their bloodlines are protected. They're genetically distinct." Rena looked closer, a flicker of excitement in her eyes. "She's right," she said, pulling a reference book from a shelf. "The physical characteristics are undeniable. If we can get photos of the horses in that holding pen, if they're Kigas too, that's your proof. It's enough to get a federal injunction and stop that shipment." A new plan, just as dangerous, was born. They had to get back to the valley, sneak onto Gage's property, and get photographic evidence of the stolen horses before the truck arrived at midnight. Rena looked at Jack. "You're asking me to break a dozen laws and risk my career on the word of a man I just met, and his very smart daughter." Jack met her gaze. "I'm just asking you to help save something that can't save itself." Rena was silent for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across her face. "Thomas Gage is about to have a very, very bad day," she said, grabbing her coat and a high-powered telephoto lens from her office. "Let's go for a drive." They raced back towards Cedar Ridge, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and blood. They were a strange, desperate team, a broken soldier, a brilliant girl, and a renegade biologist. As they drove, Rena made a call. "I need you to meet me," she said into her phone. "And bring your badge." They arrived back at the valley under the cover of darkness. The air was cold and still. The rendezvous point was a deserted crossroads miles from Gage's ranch. A single pair of headlights appeared out of the darkness. It was Deputy Ruiz. He got out of his car, his face a mask of tension. "You're all crazy," he said, looking from Jack to Rena. "This goes wrong. We all go down." "It's already gone wrong, Miguel," Jack said. "We're just trying to make it right." The four of them, bound by a fragile, dangerous alliance, drove to the edge of Gage's property. The holding pen was a quarter-mile hike through rough country. The moon was a sliver, providing just enough light to see the shadows of the huddled horses. Jack and Lily crept forward, camera in hand, while Ruiz and Rena kept watch. The horses were skittish, their eyes wide with fear. Lily moved slowly, speaking in a low, calming whisper. She lifted her camera. The click of the shutter sounded like a gunshot in the silent night. Suddenly, a spotlight cut through the darkness, pinning them. "Well, well, look what we have here," a voice boomed. It was Gage. He wasn't alone. Two of his ranch hands stood with him, rifles in their hands. They'd been set up. Ruiz's hand went to his gun. "Don't be a fool, Deputy," Gage sneered. "I knew you didn't have the stomach for this. I've been watching you since you gave him that manifest." It was a trap. Ruiz hadn't been helping them. He'd led them right to Gage. Betrayal, sharp and cold, twisted in Jack's gut. "You were always weak, Callahan," Gage said, stepping closer, "in the desert and here. Always trying to save things that are meant to die." Lily stood frozen, clutching the camera. Jack pushed her behind him. "Let them go, Gage," he said, his voice low and steady. "This is between you and me." Gage laughed. "It's too late for that." He nodded to his men. But before they could move, another set of headlights roared over the hill, sirens blaring. A dozen state police cars screeched to a halt, surrounding the holding pen. Out of the lead car stepped Dr. Rena Moore, but she wasn't alone. Beside her was a federal marshal. "Thomas Gage," Rena's voice rang out, clear and cold, amplified by a bullhorn. "You're under arrest for violations of the Wild and Free-Roaming Horses and Burros Act." Gage stared, dumbfounded. "How?" Then he saw Ruiz. The deputy wasn't looking at him. He was looking at Jack, a small, almost imperceptible nod. The betrayal wasn't what it seemed. Ruiz had played them all. He knew Gage was suspicious. He'd set up the trap, knowing Gage would be there. He'd used Jack and Lily as bait, but he'd also been the one to call in the cavalry. Rena's call hadn't been to him. It had been to the marshal he'd told her to contact. It was a double cross within a double cross. The flash from Lily's camera went off, capturing the stunned look on Gage's face as the marshals cuffed him. The evidence was irrefutable. The photos, the manifest, the horses themselves. It was over. As Gage was led away, he looked at Jack, his eyes filled with a bitter hatred. "This isn't over, Callahan," he spat. But his words were empty. The sound of the rescued Mustangs nickering softly in the pen drowned him out. Jack looked at Ruiz, who gave him a tired, crooked smile. "Told you this wasn't the desert, Jack," he said. "Sometimes the good guys actually win." In the weeks that followed, the valley changed. The story of the rescue, the conspiracy, and the takedown became local legend. The Callahan place was no longer a refuge for ghosts, but a sanctuary for the living. With funding secured by Dr. Moore and a grant from the state, Jack and Lily established the Callahan Equine Recovery Center. It became a place for horses seized from illegal operations, and more than that, a place for people. Veterans like Jack started showing up, men and women who understood what it was like to be branded by the past, who found a quiet, healing peace in the presence of the rescued Mustangs. Thomas Gage was convicted, his ranch seized, and turned into a protected Mustang preserve, managed by Rena's foundation. They named it Wild Mercy. One crisp autumn morning, a year later, Jack and Lily stood at the edge of their property. The gate was open. Ash, his coat gleaming in the sun, stood beside them. He was healed, strong. He could stay, or he could go. The choice was his. "You didn't just save a horse, you know," Lily said, leaning against her father. "You saved us." Jack put an arm around her, his eyes on the horse. "No," he said softly, "he saved us." Ash looked at them one last time, a deep, knowing look. Then he turned, and with a powerful surge, he ran. Not away from something, but toward everything. He galloped across the meadow, a symbol of the wild, stubborn freedom they had all fought for. They watched until he was just a speck on the distant ridge, disappearing into the vast open land that was finally his own. The wind whispered through the tall grass, and for the first time, it didn't sound like ghosts. It sounded like a promise. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know your favorite part. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories like this one. And don't miss out. Hit the notification bell so you're always updated on our latest content. Your support truly means the world to us.